Chris, appreciate you joining, man. I wanna start here because obviously you are a former football player who became an entrepreneur during your college days, which 5, 10 years ago, that wasn't something that you seen a lot of athletes doing. So I'm curious to know, man, how did your athletic background and experience as a football player shape your mindset and your approach to entrepreneurship and business at such a young age?
Yeah, man. First of all, thanks for doing this. This is gonna be fun. But yeah, when I went to college, I always jokingly tell everybody, pre-NIL, right? So you come from the opposite of money, which means no money, and you had to figure out a way to make money. So it was kind of one of those kind of like forces in you. You know, you're already an athlete, you're competitive naturally, and it was just one of those things I think that ended up naturally taking over to the other side really early on. And that was kind of how I got started. And that was in college. And then life after football, it almost became like this itch. Like that was part of my personality. That was part of me and who I was. So I just never really lost it. Now you see a lot of guys that start really early with that, where you definitely didn't see a lot of them starting with it in college like I was 10 years ago, right? It just wasn't as much of a thing. I remember getting kind of, the nudge of like the nerd sitting in the locker room with his laptop out, coding and things like that before we had all the vibe coding platforms. So it just started early for me, honestly, and it just kind of became part of who I was.
Do you remember back then having like any mentors or examples of other athletes who were, entrepreneurs or more business minded that you can kind of lean on or look to?
You know, it's almost kind of like this controversial, maybe in a sense of, I hate saying Tom Brady because he was like, oh, he was always the greatest, but he had his TB12 stuff that he was doing. He was doing a
Yeah.
lot of nutritional things off the field. And I was actually studying kinesiology at the time in college. That's what I studied. So it was one of those things where that naturally started to play an effect. Is like he was great on the field, and then off the field, he was also doing really great things. Even that was early for him still at that point in time. So I think I saw a lot of that naturally happen there. But again, there wasn't a ton of guys at that point in time. This is circa 2014, 15,
Yeah.
16. Wasn't a ton, a lot of them after football for sure started getting into the business side of things.
Did you experience, because obviously like athletes, a lot of them at times struggle with their identity. It's so tied to being an athlete. Did you struggle with any type of identity like crisis that most athletes experience when they're making that transition, or was there like a kind of natural um association with entrepreneurship and you just felt like that was just another factor of who you were? Did you always see yourself as like being multifaceted?
That's a good question. I think every athlete, no matter at what level, you're going to struggle with what that transition of after sports looks like. And even myself struggled in a sense with it because you're so tied to the game. No matter what else you were doing, it was still like, that's kind of who I am. And that was definitely who I was. I let it identify me, which I don't recommend anybody let their sport identify who they are. You should be multifaceted. You should do other things. And so for me, it was a hard transition, but I also didn't have a ton of time to think about it. I didn't have a cushion to fall back on. It was, you've got to figure it out. You've got to figure it out now. So you better keep trying to push forward. So I didn't have a ton of time to figure it out. I can remember a few months where it was tough and kind of on the down end of some of my workouts and things with teams where it was kind of like I could feel it coming more than anything. You knew, hey, this was going to be the end of that part of my life. So.
Got you. And obviously you've had two exits, man. Like most people don't even have one. As an entrepreneur, walk me through that process and some of the lessons that you learned from building businesses and then selling them afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I will say my one thing that I tell everybody about building a business now is start organized from the beginning. Don't have to try to organize everything at the end. I'll brief with that, but it's interesting. I've been very fortunate, honestly, just to have done what I did. With my first company in college, sell it just because of the niche that we were in, and then going after that with Sideline. It was just one of those things where if you build something compelling enough, you still got to go sell it. You don't build something and they will come. That doesn't really work in this space. You've still got to hit the ground, hit the pavement running, and you kind of grind through that. And I think that's what when companies are looking to acquire a company or PE firms are looking to buy something, they're looking for something that, somebody built a brand on and they're just hoping to go apply money and then grow it from there. So, uh, for me, honestly, my one thing about building it is go make all of the relationships in the world because that's how you're going to build that company in the first place, right? Like my first one, I really tried to do solo. It was really all about me. Then in Sideline, I really got more out there. I met a lot of great people, a lot of people that could direct me in the right direction, that could help in certain areas of the business, that could help us grow in other parts, and set up partnerships with other companies that then eventually led to offers and deals and acquisitions that we went down that road with. Um, but I think it's just really being out there more than anything is like build the brand and build your personal brand and the company brand at the same time is a really big deal.
Absolutely. I love that advice. One of the things I think is interesting about football is that, to me, one of the more complex sports. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people involved, and there's a natural parallel with that in entrepreneurship. It's the same kind of feel. Um, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like how football played a part in you hiring and building a team. Do you think there was like what are some of the lessons or takeaways that you got from playing, on a football team with a lot of different moving parts and complexities and the parallels between that and building a startup and building a team around yourself?
Yeah, this is one of the most common questions I think when you talk about like the athlete moving over to like business person. And if you look back, I think you're starting to talk about it. People are starting to talk about it more now. But if you look back 5, 10 years ago, business owners loved to hire collegiate athletes, former collegiate athletes. I think there's a reason for it, right? Because it's you got to show up every day. You have to put in the work every single day. Your scholarship's going to go away if not, right? You've got to do it when nobody's looking. You've got to do it in the summer when you're on vacations, when you're on winter break, right? Summer break, fall break, whatever it is. You still got to show up every day because the day that you go back to campus and all of a sudden you can't run your gassers anymore, coaches notice, right? They know who's putting in the work over time. And for me personally, on the business side of things, being a long snapper, being a specialist, it was kind of one of those things where there's a lot of highs and lows. For me, there was good days, there was bad days in snapping. There was a lot going on there where, you kind of had to go through my dogs.
Yeah.
You have to go through the mundane pieces of, bad days, good days, whatever it might be, right? So it's the same thing in business. There's highs, there's lows, there's good times, there's bad times, and you just had to continue to work through that. And I think that was something that I really carried over a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, let's talk about 51 Ventures, man. Like, what made you want to start your own venture fund and invest in sports tech startups? Like, where did that all come from for you? And what even more so, like, what type of startups are catching your attention these days? Like, what's the focus with 51?
Yeah. So for me personally, like my thing was when I started building, I'll talk about Sideline specifically. When I started building that, it was one of those deals where, you know, I felt like I knew best, right? And I think most founders, you shouldn't feel like you know best, right? You should know your market the best, right? But I feel like I couldn't really get through to VC, to, investors and things when I was talking and pitching, right? Now, granted, I probably didn't have all the right, credentials and the wording and, everything super ironed out for what they were looking for. And that's one side of the puzzle. But I also I just had this like deep understanding of like I knew what I knew. And I finally got to the people that could believe in me and did believe in me and wrote us checks and helped us get there. But it was like beating my head against a wall. And it was always like that. And so I always felt like access to capital was one of the most important things, and especially in this industry, because you're kind of trying to survive for as long as you can before that time comes where you really ramp up, right? This is a special industry in sports specifically. And so I wanted to be able to be that person on the other side of the table where I knew what it felt like to beat your head against a wall. I could pick you out of a lineup that said, that guy kind of reminds me of that girl kind of reminds me of me. That was that essence where it was like if I could go find the me's of the world that didn't have the perfect pedigree, that didn't have the perfect background, that didn't have everything under the sun that a VC is trying to look for, but we could provide them some more resources. Those things that I was like, I just wish I had this. I just wish I had a little bit of money. couple more connections, a couple ins at a couple teams that would push us way over the edge. Now, I had to go do most of that by myself. And then I got really lucky with some of the investors that did come along that introduced us along the way. But I was like, that was where it started, right? And
Hmm.
I was like, I could really be that person for somebody.
Hmm. And what type of companies are you guys looking for? Like what sectors of sports tech are
Yeah.
you bullish on or you see the most like long-term potential?
Yeah, so I really love I'll kind of break it down like this. I think
Hmm.
data is at the center of everything. And I want data collection because I think data is the most important thing. When you talk about AI, good data, great data makes that product better. When you talk about fan engagement, which is one of our elements, data makes that better because if you understand the fan, the way that they want things, the way they want to experience the setup, the way that they want to move, then the data behind that is great essence. And then on the athlete performance side, which is another one of ours. So fan engagement, athlete performance, and all centering around data collection. So on the athlete performance side, whether it's on the field, mental, off the field, doesn't matter. We want to go down those sectors as well.
And then, obviously we're starting to see this influx of sports funds from a broader perspective, start to emerge, throughout the landscape. What do you think differentiates 51 Ventures from some of the other funds or firms that are out there?
Yeah, just to be real straightforward about it, like I've been there and I've been there most recently, right? I've been in the founder's seat, and I think that was the whole driving force behind it was we can enact real value. I'm not speaking from a lens of a traditional investor. That's just not the way I'm going to operate. Less than 7% of actual founders that have built a company, raised capital, actually become VCs, right? Actually become investors. There's a reason for that, right? It's not the same kind of mode. It's not the same kind of thing. But also, those are the most successful return funds as well. And there's a reason for that because that deep experience, that understanding that we have, me, my team, we can supply the resources and things that we need at a lower cost, right? Like we're the investor. Nobody's here to make money. So I have my guys set up, and whether it's product development, marketing, business development, I've got guys that we can bring in strategically to that company and help grow that within it, right? Without having to spend excess in capital to go hire the best in the business. We've already got the best in the business ready to go that have done this multiple times already. And so that was really our big play.
Can you dive deeper into some of the metrics that you guys look for? Like, obviously, there's a kind of a baseline that most investors want to see as far as like the TAM and the return profile. But what are kind of some of those outliers that you guys look for within the startups or the founders that you're currently looking to invest in?
So, actually, whether it's right, wrong, or in the middle, I always tell everybody the last thing I look at is the numbers, right? That's really my last go-to, especially when you talk about sports, because I want to sit here and say that I understand the landscape, right? And I want to understand the way that we work in it. So it's never really about the number. Now we focus on pre-seed and seed stage from like the VC fund itself, and our whole goal, I don't care if it's zero revenue, I don't care if it's, 400, 500K in revenue. Once we get beyond some of that, maybe it's a little too late for us to come in. There's a little more process that have been established, but really numbers are going to be the last thing I look at. I want to know that you're the perfect founder for this issue. I want you to have some kind of experience in this realm that it's like that's the perfect person to solve this problem. Whether you were a coach, you were an admin, you lived this, right? You were a trainer, you lived that area and you were an expert at that and you built this because you saw the pain point and you know it better than anybody else. And I think that's what I'm looking for more so than just the numbers that go behind it. So we don't really stick to anything too strict other than maybe later on when you are doing a little bit too much revenue for us to get involved early enough. But at the same time, if you're the guy or the girl, you're the guy or the girl, for it. So that's the way I think about it.
I love it. That's really good advice. And then last question, when you're kind of thinking about founders and investing in them, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to get in front of you on how to pitch appropriately, how to gain investment or get in front of 51 Ventures, like general advice?
To be honest with you, the ones that I have invested in, that we've invested in, we had longer relationships with. It didn't come from one meeting to the next where it was like, okay, let's open up due diligence process and go down this path. It was, hey, what do you think? Hey, can I get your opinion? Hey, can we talk through this? Here's our product. Here's more things. Here's sales. Here's what we're doing and keeping us in the loop. And then naturally over time, the relationship built where it was like, hey, I have a few connections for you. And then we introduced that to, some of the people that we know, some of the folks that we've got on our side. And all of a sudden it naturally would happen where it's like, this is really good. And we've got a few customers ready to go for it actually. So we should probably write a check. And it was this natural relationship that built over time that built into something really good on our side where we brought value to the table when we came on board as well.
Build a relationship before you actually need to
Yeah.
utilize it. I love that. That's really good. Looking towards the future of the sports tech space and some of the trends, like what are some of the things that you're kind of seeing on the horizon, or some of the trends or opportunities that you think people aren't really paying attention to or are kind of sleeping on right now?
Well, if you talk about tech in general, though, I think that everybody's focused on a team league ownership right now. I think that's huge, right? And I've talked about this, I put it in my newsletter a lot, that if we talk about what's under the hood, what's running the teams, what's behind the scenes going on, right? And I stick to our guns on our thesis model of fan engagement and athlete performance, right? Because those are the two things that I know that can make a team or a league more valuable, right? More viewership, more fan engagement, and better athletes performing better on the field inherently grows that asset that you've bought into from a team or league aspect. So those are the two centerpieces. I think fan engagement, I probably talked about it a year ago, and you kind of get some looks and you're like, oh, well, what's fan engagement really mean? And now I think everybody's wanting to talk about fan engagement because it's crucial, right? You talk about the collegiate aspect, you've really got to turn everything to a revenue sharing type model. You've got to turn into where the athletes or the departments are making money from their fans more like a professional team are, where they can actually generate revenue and then give that back to the athletes. And then on the performance side, everything's got to tie back to revenue somehow, right? No matter what it is, in my opinion. So those two sectors, I believe that those will be the two that are the under the hood look.
And, we're obviously hearing a lot about like youth sports, women's sports. Do you all see yourself possibly expanding into those verticals or opportunities such as those in the future?
Yeah, I think the beauty of those two thesis points for us is they span from pro all the way down to youth, right? You have fans, parents, things like that. You also have performance and starting that stuff at the young ages. I think that that can go a long way to the growth of the athlete over time as well. So we really try to span the entire from pro, collegiate to youth, high school, and everything in between as well in both.
And then, last couple questions before we wrap up. Getting back to the athlete standpoint for a second, because I think one of the things that's interesting is we are seeing a lot of athletes getting into investing, whether that is through the angel route or syndicates is becoming a really big trend these days. What role do you think athletes, current and former, kind of play within, shaping the future of the sports business ecosystem, technology, and et cetera going forward?
Yeah, for a long time, and it's still true that athletes obviously have, a stage. They have their own presence, right? Everybody knows them as the athlete that they are. And so I think that there's a lot to the marketing side when you talk about an athlete coming on board, whether it's an investable role or just an advisory role or an influencer role with a company. It's super, super vital. But I think something that gets overlooked, I know a lot of athletes that are very active, these guys are a lot more intelligent than I think some of the crowd gives them credit for. And I think that there's a lot more value in things that they've seen and know and heard through their years. I mean, you got to think they've been at the most elite level of sports. They've also, that's the most elite level of business as well. They've definitely heard and seen and been a part of other things. I think that, don't just look at them for their name, image, and likeness, if you will. Look at them for what they might actually know. And I do think that that's a really big deal because a lot of these athletes are really intelligent and have some really good chops on them for a business. So.
I mean, and you've given some great advice to founders, but for an athlete who's looking to get into investing and maybe go the venture route, what advice would you give them on how to go about, launching their own fund and getting into that ecosystem?
I would recommend, and it's the advice that I was given early too, was don't write your first check on the first company you talk to. Talk to 10, talk to 20, talk to 50, talk to 100, and then you'll start to pick up on things. You'll start to understand like where the good ones lie and where the maybe not so good ones lie, and what those differences are and what sets different things apart and what those markers can be that you can focus in on. And I think once you can understand that, then get your feet wet, understand like what those timelines look like from a business aspect, like where it's like, I'm writing this check, what do I expect out of the return? What's the next round look like? What is my dilution? Different elements that go into that, and how you can portray yourself and put yourself at the forefront through many various things that happen in the investment components. So just really dive in and don't write your first check right away. Just live a little, like see it all, and then grow and go beyond that.
I like that. Last question, man. I know you're a football guy, but looking at the global ecosystem of sports, if you had unlimited resources and capital, and there was only one sport you can bet on, what sport would that be and why?
If I had unlimited, I it would probably be soccer, to be totally honest, because I've always known it to be huge overseas and in pretty much every other country. And the funny part is that we always talk about how the US is the biggest market to get into. Once you can get into the US market with a tech product from overseas, you're gonna master, you're gonna be the granddaddy of them all, right? I want to say it's the same way for the sport itself. And I think you're just now seeing the cusp of it really coming to the US and being a dominant sport. I know it's a little bit later, obviously it's been around and everybody knows about it for the most part, but you would be amazed how many people don't watch soccer yet, aren't invested in soccer yet, and haven't really realized its true potential yet in the States. And so I think it's going to explode here after we've got World Cup and everything coming up in the future here. So I expect it to take a pretty hard turn.
I love it. Chris, appreciate your time, man. Lastly, can you let people know where they can find more about you and 51 Ventures as well?
Yeah, man, just find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much where I spend all of my time. That's the best route for me. Try to keep up. So,
Appreciate you, brother.
all right, bro. Appreciate you, man.